Welcome to today's story, Chasing the Mirage of Freedom, generated by StoryWave.ai. March 2024, please tap that like button, share, and subscribe for more. Chapter 1, The Silent City. The Phoenix I once knew, a city of ceaseless motion and cacophonous symphony, had transformed into a silent mausoleum under the iron fist of a regime that promised safety but delivered a cage. The streets, once vibrant with life, now lay barren, save for the occasional drone that hummed through the desolate sky, its cargo of meager rations dangling beneath like a carrot dangled before a starving mule. I, Karen Bryant, a woman of no small intellect and determination, found myself confined within the four walls of what used to be a sanctuary, my home. Each day blurred into the next, a monotonous loop of isolation, my only solace in the gadgets I tinkered with, remnants of a past life as an engineer. Today, I stood by my window, peering through the blinds, as a heart-wrenching scene unfolded below. Mr. Jacobs, the kindly old man who lived down the street, was out for what he thought was a stealthy venture to his mailbox. A simple act of normalcy that turned tragic when the patrolling soldiers, gripped by a relentless paranoia, mistook his frail figure for one of the undead that had sparked this whole catastrophe. Before I could even gasp, a single shot rang out, and Mr. Jacobs crumpled to the ground, his mail scattering like leaves in the wind. My hands shook as I backed away from the window, the metallic taste of fear and anger on my tongue. It was an unforgivable mistake, a life snuffed out based on a hasty and wrongful assumption. The repressive weight of our reality crashed down upon me with renewed force. I could no longer stand idly by, a spectator in my own life. A soft knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Raj, the slender, inventive soul known affectionately as the Tinkerer. His dark eyes were filled with concern, and in his hands he cradled his latest creation, a homemade communication device. "Karen," he whispered, his voice barely above the sound of the drone outside, "I know you've seen what happened. We can't let fear silence us. This," he said, holding the device out to me, "is how we start taking back our voices." I accepted the device, running my fingers over the intricate wiring and makeshift buttons. Raj's talent for creating something out of nothing never ceased to amaze me. His soft-spoken manner belied the sharpness of his mind, and in that moment I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. "Thank you, Raj," I said, my own voice steady with resolve. "It's time we remind them that we're not just survivors, we're fighters." We sat at my kitchen table, the drone of the ever-present surveillance outside fading into the background as we discussed our plans. With each passing moment, the communication device between us became more than just a tool. It symbolized a lifeline, a chance to weave a network of like-minded individuals desperate for a taste of the freedom we'd lost. The night stretched on, and our conversation never waned. We plotted and planned, our words a dance of strategy and defiance. Raj shared stories of others he had spoken to, people who clung to the belief that somewhere beyond the city limits, in the Flagstaff Mountains, there was a sanctuary, a haven from the chaos. The idea seemed as elusive and intangible as a mirage in the desert, yet it beckoned to us with the sweet promise of freedom. As dawn approached and Raj took his leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the precipice of something monumental. I lay in bed, the homemade device resting on my nightstand, a silent sentinel in the darkness. The repressive beginnings of our escape clung to the edges of my mind, a reminder that the path ahead would be fraught with peril. But as I closed my eyes, I envisioned the Flagstaff Mountains rising majestically against the horizon, a symbol of the freedom that awaited us. And with that image seared into my thoughts, I drifted into a restless slumber, dreams of rebellion and liberation swirling through the quiet of the night. Chapter 2, Hushed Whispers. The sun peeked over the horizon, casting an amber glow on the crumbling facades of the Phoenix homes. It was a cruel irony, the way the light mocked the darkness of our reality. The drone's distant buzz was a grim reminder of the watchful eyes that monitored our every move, yet beneath the surface, a murmur of rebellion began to stir. I sat at my kitchen table, the homemade communicator Raj had given me now alive with static. It was through this device that I first heard it, the faintest hint of a rumor that was enough to ignite a wildfire of hope in my chest. They spoke of a place free from the tyranny that shackled us, a sanctuary nestled within the Flagstaff Mountains. The very thought seemed as tangible as the dust that danced in the beams of sunlight filtering through my window. But with hope came doubt, gnawing at the edges of my mind like a relentless pest. Was this sanctuary a true haven, or merely a fable concocted by desperate souls seeking solace in fantasy? I grappled with the uncertainty, the idea of hope being as dangerous as it was comforting. If the sanctuary was real, it could be our salvation. If not, it could be the very thing that would crush what little spirit we had left. As I mulled over these thoughts, a soft rap on the door jolted me from my reverie. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to see a familiar face. It was Michael, an old friend and a kindred spirit in the plight that had befallen us. His eyes were weary, yet they held a spark I hadn't seen in years. "Karen," Michael greeted, his voice a hushed whisper as I ushered him inside. "I've come across something, information that could change everything for us." I offered him a seat, and he took it gratefully, his bones creaking like the wooden chair beneath him. He spoke of clandestine meetings and secret messages passed between the cracks of our surveillance state. There was talk of an exodus, a plan to flee the city and head for the mountains. His words poured out in a fervent rush, painting a picture of a future that seemed both exhilarating and terrifying. "Are you certain of this, Michael?" I asked, the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. "We can't afford to chase after ghosts." He nodded, conviction firm in his gaze. "I've seen the maps, Karen. I've heard the whispers. There are people out there who still believe in freedom, and they're ready to fight for it." The room was heavy with the magnitude of his revelation, and I knew that this was the moment that would define our path forward. I needed a group I could trust, a small assembly of neighbors who shared our thirst for liberation. The thought of rallying them under this cause was daunting, yet the fire that Michael's words had stoked within me refused to be extinguished. In the days that followed, I reached out to those I trusted most, using Raj's device to spread the word without raising the suspicions of our ever-present overseers. We met under the guise of mundane activities, our conversations laced with coded messages and silent understandings. Each member brought their own strengths, their own desperate desire to reclaim the life that had been stolen from us. Together, we were more than just survivors. We were a landmark of defiance in a world that sought to extinguish our will. Our meetings were a symphony of hushed whispers, a harmony of shared purpose that grew stronger with each passing day. We were the heartbeat of a city that refused to die, the soul of a people that would not be broken. As night fell upon the silent city, I lay in the darkness, the voices of my newfound allies echoing in my mind. The doubt that had plagued me was now replaced with a fierce determination. Whether the sanctuary was a myth or a miracle, it mattered not. What mattered was the journey, the fight, the unyielding drive to chase after the mirage of freedom, wherever it might lead. Chapter 3: Nightly Gatherings. Moonlight filtered through the cracks of boarded windows, casting long shadows across the room where we huddled. Our once vibrant community had been reduced to whispers in the dark, but in this hushed congregation, we found strength. I leaned against the wall, watching as my neighbors, now comrades in our silent strife, circled around a tattered map sprawled on the floor. The air was thick with determination, every one of us understanding the gravity of our nightly rendezvous. To be caught meant certain doom at the hands of the merciless soldiers patrolling our desolate streets. The group was inclusive, each bringing their own slice of expertise to the table. There was Emily, the nurse, whose hands had healed many, and whose knowledge of medicine would be invaluable on our perilous journey. Beside her, young Joss, a sprightly kid with a knack for navigating the back alleys and forgotten passages of Phoenix. "Look here," Joss said, pointing to a section of the map with a grimy finger. "This sewer line runs past the city limits. It's risky, but it could be our way out." His suggestion sparked a chorus of murmurs, each person weighing the possibility against the peril. It was Alex, the burly former construction worker, who broke the silence with his deep, gruff voice. "We'll need to be quiet as church mice down there. And what about the grates? They're locked down tight." Emily's eyes gleamed with a grit that belied her gentle appearance. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve for that. We just need to be smart about it. As the plan took shape, an intricate ballet of logistics and daring, I couldn't help but notice David. He sat apart from the group, arms folded, a shadow of reservation painted across his face. His hesitance was like a crack in a dam, threatening to burst and flood our fragile operation. I approached him, my steps soft but purposeful. "David," I said, keeping my voice low, "you've been quiet tonight. What's on your mind?" He glanced up, the flicker of candlelight catching the worry in his eyes. "It's just, are we sure about this? It feels like we're betting everything on a whisper." I understood his fear. The sanctuary was our beacon, but none of us had seen its light with our own eyes. "I know it's a leap of faith," I replied, "but staying here, trapped and waiting for the end, that's not living, David. We have to try." He nodded slowly, the internal battle playing out behind his gaze. "I'm with you, Karen. It's just hard to let go of the devil you know, you know?" His words hung in the air, a conviction that likely echoed in the hearts of everyone in the room. We were all clinging to the remnants of a world we understood, even as it suffocated us. Turning back to the group, I felt the weight of our shared destiny. We were a patchwork of skills and secrets, bound by a common thread of hope. It was this unity that would carry us through the darkest hours, this alliance that would forge our path to freedom. We continued deep into the night, our voices a soft cadence of strategy and solidarity. The map before us was no longer just paper and ink, but a symbol of our collective will. As dawn crept upon the horizon, we dispersed like wraiths, each returning to the false safety of our homes. The silence of the city settled once more, but beneath it thrummed the pulse of our insurgents. With each nightly gathering, we were one step closer to dancing in the light of our Mirage of Freedom. Chapter 4, Map of Shadows. The night cloaked our movements as we gathered in the dimly lit basement of Raj's home, a place that had become our unofficial headquarters. The air was thick with the musk of old books and the metallic scent of hidden wires, a testament to the mechanical genius that was Raj. Across the walls, the glow of numerous screens cast a web of blue light, illuminating a large table in the center where a map sprawled like a canvas of our confined world. Raj stood beside the table, his slender fingers tracing the labyrinth of Phoenix's streets, marked with zones of military control and lines that snaked between them like threads of hope. His eyes, brown and sharp, flicked up to meet mine as I approached. "Karen," he said, his voice a soft-spoken melody that held an edge of excitement. "This is it, the blueprint of our freedom." I leaned over the map, taking in the intricate details. The zones were marked in red, a glaring disparity to the green lines that represented our potential paths of escape. "We'll need more hands on deck," I muttered, scanning the areas we needed to cross. "That's the tricky part," Emily interjected, joining us with her arms crossed. Her nurse's uniform was a patchwork of stains and stitches, a badge of her tireless work. "Who do we trust?" A silence fell over the group, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. Trust was a currency more valuable than gold in our world, and it was in woefully short supply. It was then that Joe spoke up, his youthful voice cutting through the tension. "We could start with the old library crew. They've been holed up since the outbreak. They know books, and books mean knowledge." The idea struck a chord, and a plan began to form. We needed supplies if we were to venture beyond the city limits, and the abandoned library was a trove of forgotten resources. As midnight approached, we embarked on our raid, moving through the shadows like phantoms. The library, once a marker of knowledge, stood silent and forsaken, its doors barricaded and its windows dark. We slipped inside, our flashlights cutting swathes through the dust-laden air as we scavenged for maps, medical texts, and any scrap of information that could aid us. It was Alex who stumbled upon the first message, a note scrawled in a margin of an atlas, cryptic words that hinted at a cache of supplies hidden within the city. A benefactor, unknown and unseen, had left us a breadcrumb trail to follow. We gathered in a circle, the stolen books piled at our feet, and examined the message. Raj's brow furrowed as he read it aloud, his accent tinged with the flavors of a distant home. "Under the watchful gaze of the copper lion, where the water once flowed, you will find hope," he recited, his voice a hush of intrigue. We exchanged glances, the meaning of the message dawning on us. The copper lion was a statue in one of the city's dry fountains, a landmark we had all passed without a second thought. The night's haul had been fruitful, and the promise of more was a siren's call. As we dispersed to our respective homes, the unknown benefactor's message burned bright in my mind. The map of shadows was our guide, and with each clue, each new ally, we wove the fabric of our deliverance tighter. In the silence of my own room, I pondered the identity of our mysterious helper. Their knowledge of our plight and their willingness to aid us from the darkness was a puzzle I was determined to solve. But for now, I clutched the map close, a tangible whisper of the freedom that beckoned us onward. Chapter 5: Echoes of the Past. The deserted engineering firm where I once thrived stood before me, a relic swallowed by silence. Its once gleaming glass facade was now a spiderweb of cracks, the lobby that buzzed with innovation reduced to a graveyard of obsolete tech. This place, a cornerstone of my former life, was the key to our nascent rebellion's success. I pushed open the heavy door, its creak breaking the silence like a scream in the night. The stale air inside was thick with the dust of abandonment, each particle a fragment of a life I'd left behind. The grand atrium, which had echoed with the footsteps of my colleagues, now resounded with the ghostly whispers of the past. Raj had insisted on coming along, his tool belt jangling with each stealthy step. "We'll need to be quick," he reminded me, his voice a soft murmur. "The patrols are less frequent here, but we can't take chances." I nodded, leading the way to the research and development wing, where the most advanced projects were kept under lock and key. The door, once secured by a keypad, hung ajar, its security features long since failed. Inside, the skeletons of unfinished drones perched on workbenches, their potential untapped. As Raj scavenged for useful components, I delved deeper into the room, my hand brushing against a drone I had helped design. Its sleek form was coated in grime, but beneath the neglect, the promise of autonomy lingered. "Karen, check this out," Raj called out, his voice tinged with excitement. "These circuit boards are still intact. If we can power them up, we could have eyes in the sky." I joined him, and together we examined the tech. The drones could be our eyes, soaring above the city to chart a safe course beyond the confines of Phoenix. Imagine the edge this would give us, I mused, the weight of leadership settling on my shoulders like a mantle I had not asked for but was destined to wear. Raj's eyes met mine, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken truth. The group was looking to me, to us, for guidance. "You've got the vision, Karen. We all see it. You're the one who can lead us to freedom." His words echoed through the chamber of my thoughts, mingling with the memories of a time when my aspirations were bound to the rise and fall of stock prices, not the pulse of survival. How quickly the world had changed, and with it, the essence of what it meant to lead. We worked in tandem, stripping the drones of their bondage to a defunct system, repurposing them for our cause. With each component salvaged, the blueprint of our escape grew clearer, the path to the mountains less insurmountable. The journey back to Raj's home was a silent one. Our bags were heavy with the spoils of our mission, and my heart was heavy with the realization of the role I had come to occupy within our group. They saw in me a warning signal, a navigator through the treacherous waters that lay ahead. The map of shadows hung on the wall, now dotted with the locations of our benefactors' caches and the zones we dared not tread. We gathered around it, the group's faces illuminated by the soft glow of the screens, each one etched with the determination that had become our collective signature. "We've got a chance now, a real chance," I said, my voice steady, my gaze lingering on each member of our fledgling resistance. "These drones can guide us, help us avoid the patrols. We're not just chasing shadows anymore. We're building a future." Nods of agreement rippled through the group, their trust in me both a burden and a privilege. As we dispersed for the night, I lingered by the map, tracing the lines that represented our path to the Flagstaff Mountains, to the Mirage of Freedom that called to us with the promise of a new dawn. In the quiet that followed, I allowed myself a moment to reflect on the echoes of the past that had led me here. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but as the unspoken leader of this band of dreamers and fighters, I embraced the challenge. For in the heart of the struggle, we would find the essence of who we were meant to become. Chapter 6: A Crack in the Wall. The morning sun had yet to chase away the chill of the desert night as we huddled around the weathered map Yos had found. Our breaths hung in the air, visible puffs that danced and disappeared as if reluctant to reveal our secrets. The map showed a network of forgotten sewage tunnels, a web of subterranean veins that could lead us beyond the city's suffocating grasp. Raj, his brow furrowed in concentration, traced a route with his finger, his tool belt clinking softly in the stillness. These tunnels have been abandoned for years. It's a risky path, but it's our best shot at slipping away unnoticed. Alex, arms folded like the sturdy beams that once supported the buildings he worked on, nodded in agreement. We'll need to move carefully. These old structures aren't exactly stable. The thought of delving into the bowels of the city, into the darkness that could very well be teeming with the undead, sent a ripple of unease through the group. Yet, the promise of freedom that lay on the other side fueled our resolve. "We need to know what we're dealing with," Emily said, her nurse's experience with life and death lending her a pragmatic air. A trial run. Just a small team to scout ahead. The decision was made. I volunteered, along with Emily, Raj, and Jose. We equipped ourselves with flashlights, makeshift weapons, and the few supplies we could carry. The entrance to the tunnels was a gaping maw in the ground, hidden by the remnants of an old maintenance shed on the city's edge. The shed's door creaked open, protesting the disturbance after years of neglect. Inside, the darkness was absolute, a thick blanket that seemed to swallow the beams of our flashlights. The descent into the tunnel was a treacherous one, the ladder groaning under our weight, its rusted rungs threatening to give way. Once at the bottom, we found ourselves in a narrow passageway, the walls slick with the dampness that spoke of the earth's cold sweat. Our lights flickered across the graffiti of a world long gone, the scrawled messages of past inhabitants now just echoes of the past. Raj led the way, his soft-spoken voice steady as he recounted the turns and landmarks he had memorized from the map. Left at the junction, straight past the old pump station. Our journey was a slow crawl through the burdensome gloom. The silence was a living thing, broken only by the sound of dripping water and our cautious steps. It was in this hushed world that the unexpected happened. A shuffling noise, barely audible, reached our ears. We froze, the sound growing louder, a chorus of rasping breaths and dragging feet. Zombies. A horde of them, somewhere ahead in the blackness. "Back! We need to go back," Emily hissed, her calm demeanor giving way to urgent fear. We retreated, our hearts pounding a frantic rhythm as we retraced our steps. The ladder was in sight when the creatures emerged from the shadows, their eyes hollow pits of hunger. We scrambled up, the urgency lending us speed, and sealed the hatch just as the first of them reached out with decaying hands. Back in the light of day, we exchanged wide-eyed looks of relief. That had been too close. But amid the fear, there was a triumph. The path was there, treacherous and fraught with peril, but there. As we made our way back, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Michael, his eyes locking with mine. "You're brave, Karen. Braver than anyone I know." His words were simple, but they stirred something within me, a connection that went beyond the camaraderie of our shared mission. Our bond was deepening, the gravity of our situation drawing us closer in ways that were both exhilarating and complex. That night, as we recounted our harrowing experience to the rest of the group, the crack in the wall we had found became more than a physical passage. It was a symbol of the thin line between captivity and liberty, and we were determined to widen it until we could all slip through. The planning continued, each of us invested in the roles we had come to inhabit. And as our mission grew clearer, so did the understanding that we were not just a group of survivors. We were a family, bound by a common goal, and I, by unspoken consent, had become the one to lead us into the light of a new day. Chapter 7, Bullets and Shadows. As we ducked into the shell of an abandoned convenience store, the whirring sounds sliced through the calm. It was distant at first, but it grew louder, more insistent, a military drone scouting the area. "Everybody down," I whispered, my voice barely a breath, as we crouched behind the remnants of shelving units. The drone's searchlights scanned the ground outside, sweeping beams of light that could spell our doom. Raj, his fingers already dancing over the repurposed drone's controls, nodded at me. "I'll send ours up to create interference. It might buy us some time." The soft hum of our drone lifted into the air, a mechanical moth flitting towards the glaring eye of our pursuer. Raj's face was a mask of concentration, his eyes reflecting the faint glow of the screen that showed our drone's camera feed. Emily, her medical bag clutched tightly against her, leaned in close. "What's the plan if they find us?" "We scatter," I replied, keeping my eyes on the monitor. "Head for the prearranged spots. We can't let them catch us together." The tension was palpable, every muscle coiled tight, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Joss gripped his homemade weapon, a pipe wrapped in barbed wire, his youthful face set in grim determination. The military drone's light skimmed over our hiding spot, the brightness so close I could feel the heat on my skin through the broken windows. Then, with a sudden jerk, our drone veered off course, leading the military machine on a wild goose chase through the debris of collapsed buildings. Raj let out a slow breath, his shoulders relaxed slightly. It worked. It's following the false signal. We didn't have much time. The military would soon realize they were being duped and double back. We needed to move, and fast. "Let's go, now," I commanded, and we spilled out of the store like water from a broken dam, each of us sprinting towards the uncertain safety of the night. The city was a labyrinth, but we knew its paths and pitfalls. We darted through narrow alleys and over fences, the hubbub of the drone's engines a constant reminder of the danger on our heels. After what felt like an eternity, we regrouped in the husk of an old parking garage, the skeleton of cars providing scant cover. Raj was the last to arrive, his brow slick with sweat. I sent the drone on a final loop before it went down. They'll be looking in the wrong place for now. His ingenuity had saved us, and I felt a surge of gratitude. "You did good, Raj, really good." He offered me a tired smile, his usual soft-spoken demeanor replaced with the steel of someone who had just outsmarted a monster. "We make a good team, Karen." We did indeed. And as we settled in for the night, hidden in the belly of the parking garage, I knew that we had won, not just a battle, but a precious moment of time. Time to breathe, to plan, and to steel ourselves for the journey ahead. Raj's skills, the trust and camaraderie that had blossomed between us, were the true weapons in our arsenal. And as I watched over my friends, my allies, my family, I knew that no matter how advanced the technology that hunted us, it was no match for the human spirit that drove us. We were more than the sum of our parts. We were a force to be reckoned with. And as the night deepened, I felt a fierce pride in my heart. We would never give up, never surrender. We were chasing the mirage of freedom, and with every step, it was becoming more real. Chapter 8. The Cat's Game. Over here, Raj murmured, directing us to the skeletal remains of what used to be a bustling market. The scent of rotten produce still lingered in the air, a ghostly reminder of days long gone. We darted through the aisles, our movements a dance with shadows, every sound amplified in the vast emptiness. The moon was a thin crescent, barely shedding light on our path, yet enough for us to find our way. We had become creatures of the night, learning to navigate the perilous terrain as if it were our natural habitat. It was in the husk of an old theater where our luck turned. Emily tripped on a piece of debris, her ankle twisting with a sickening pop. She stifled a cry, biting down on her lip hard enough to draw blood. We huddled around her, the severity of the situation sinking in. Raj's face was a canvas of concern, his fingers trembling slightly as he touched her ankle. "We can't stay here," Alex said, his voice a grumble of urgency. "If they find us with her like this..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication hung over us like a guillotine's blade. To stay meant to risk capture or worse. "I can make it," Emily insisted, her jaw set in a grim line. "Just help me up." Raj and I exchanged a glance, the unspoken question passing between us. Could we afford to slow down? The group's trust, once as solid as the concrete beneath our feet, was showing cracks. The fear was infectious, each brush with danger leaving a deeper mark on our collective psyche. "Listen," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. "We can't leave anyone behind. We're in this together, remember?" Joss knelt beside Emily, offering a shoulder for her to lean on. "She's right. We stick together, no matter what." It was decided. We fashioned a makeshift splint from scraps of wood and torn fabric. With Emily supported between Raj and Joss, we moved on, slower now, but undeterred. The night wore on, an endless loop of hide and seek with the ever-present threat of discovery. Each step was a calculated risk, each breath a measure of our determination. As we took shelter in the remnants of a library, the tension was palpable. Books lay strewn about, their pages fluttering in the draft like the wings of lost birds. Michael, his eyes reflecting the flicker of our cautious fire, spoke up. "We need to think about what's next. We can't keep running in circles." I looked at each face, the weariness etched into their features like the lines of a well-worn map. "We keep heading north," I said. "We stick to the plan." The fire crackled, a small flare of warmth in the chill of uncertainty. The group nodded, their grit reignited by the simple clarity of purpose. As we settled into our makeshift beds, the quiet conversations began to flow, a stream of whispered strategies and shared fears. We talked of the future, of the sanctuary that awaited us, of the lives we hoped to rebuild. The night passed, a game of cat and mouse with the invisible feline that stalked us. But with each move we made, with each decision I took as their unspoken leader, we became more elusive, more determined. And as the first light of dawn crept through the broken windows, casting a soft glow on the faces of my companions, I knew that no matter the toll, no matter the fear, we would persevere. We were more than just runners. We were seekers of the Mirage of Freedom, and we would not stop until it was ours. Chapter 9. Veil of the Desert. Our water supply was dwindling, each drop as precious as the hope that drove us forward. The relentless sun beat down upon us, a harsh overseer that cared not for the fragility of human endurance. "We need to find shade," Raj said, wiping the sweat from his brow with a grimy hand. His usual calm was frayed at the edges, the toll of the desert's unforgiving embrace evident in his voice. Alex, his broad shoulders casting a meager shadow, scanned the sparse scrubland. There, he pointed to a smattering of boulders. "We can rest there for a bit." We trudged on, our feet sinking into the hot sand, each step an exemplification to our resolve. The boulders offered a scant respite, their shade a mere sliver of relief, but it was enough to grant us a moment's pause from our flight. The stillness was broken by a distant moan, the all-too-familiar sound of a zombie carried on the weak breeze. Emily clutched her medical bag tighter, her eyes scanning the horizon. "It's just one," Joss observed, squinting against the sunlight. "I can take it down." "No," I interjected, my gaze fixed on the lone figure staggering towards us. "Conserve your energy. We move as soon as we can." The group nodded, understanding the need to preserve our strength for the trials ahead. Our rest was short-lived as the desert decided to unveil its next challenge. The wind began to pick up, a gentle whisper that quickly grew into a howling chorus. A sandstorm was brewing on the horizon, a towering wall of dust and sand racing towards us. "This could be our chance," Michael said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "The storm can cover our tracks." The romantic tension between us, usually a quiet undercurrent, now surged to the forefront, providing a strange comfort amidst the chaos. His hand found mine, a silent pact between us to weather the storm together. As the sandstorm engulfed us, the world disappeared into a maelstrom of grit and wind. We wrapped our faces with whatever cloth we had, our eyes stinging, our skins scraped raw by the relentless sand. "Stay close," I called out, though I could barely hear my own voice. We linked arms, a human chain braving the tempest's fury. The storm raged around us, a tempest of nature's making that was both our adversary and our ally. It blinded our pursuers, muffled the sounds of our passage, and cloaked us in the anonymity we so desperately needed. When the storm finally abated, we emerged on the other side, battered but unbroken. The tracks of our journey had been erased, as if we were ghosts upon the landscape. The desert sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of fire and blood. We pressed on, our bodies pushed to the brink, yet driven by the unyielding desire for freedom. As night fell, we found solace in the cool embrace of darkness. The stars above were a tapestry of dreams yet to be realized, each twinkle a distant sanctuary calling us home. With the new day, we would face the desert's wrath once more, but for now we rested, the bond between us forged stronger in the crucible of our shared ordeal. We were more than just a group of survivors. We were the architects of our own destiny, chasing the mirage of freedom that shimmered just beyond the next dune. Chapter 10. Whispers in the Wind. We gathered in the shadow of a large, jagged rock formation, its surface worn by years of sand-laden winds. Our faces were etched with the lines of exhaustion and worry. Raj, with his ever-present tool belt, looked up from the device he was fiddling with, meeting my gaze. "Karen, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. I took a deep breath, the weight of leadership heavy on my shoulders. I think someone's tipping them off. Murmurs rippled through our small band. Emily's face, usually so composed, was a picture of shock. Just hand tightened around the makeshift weapon he always carried. The trust we had built was teetering on the edge of a knife. Michael stepped closer, his brows furrowed. "What makes you say that?" I gestured toward the horizon, where the sound of engines grew louder. "They're always too close, always on our heels, no matter how careful we are." The group exchanged uneasy glances, the seeds of doubt taking root. "We need to flush them out," I said, my mind racing with potential strategies. Raj nodded, his brown eyes serious. "How do you plan to do that?" I outlined my plan, a ruse involving a false radio transmission designed to send our pursuers in the wrong direction. If our movements were still anticipated, it would confirm my fears. That night, under a blanket of stars, we put the plan into action. Raj rigged up a makeshift transmitter, its signal a signal of deception. We held our breath, waiting. The following morning, as we watched from our hiding spot, a convoy of military vehicles sped off toward the false coordinates we had broadcasted. It was the confirmation we dreaded. "The rat's in the trap," I muttered, my heart sinking. The betrayal was a personal blow, a crack in the armor I had built around myself. We convened in a tight circle, the reality of our situation a heavy presence among us. "It's one of us," Michael said, his voice low. "One of us is the traitor." The words hung in the air, a toxic fog that threatened to choke us with its implications. "We can't accuse without proof," Emily cautioned, her hands trembling slightly. I looked at each of them, the faces I had come to know so well, and felt the sting of betrayal like a physical wound. We had been through so much together, yet here we were, our unity fractured by an unseen enemy in our midst. "We need to keep moving," I said, pushing past the hurt. "We can't let them win." The group nodded, a silent agreement to press on despite the turmoil that churned within us. As we packed up our meager belongings and set out once more across the unforgiving sands, I couldn't help but cast suspicious glances over my shoulder. The whispers in the wind were now tainted with distrust, and I knew that our journey to freedom had become even more perilous. But I also knew one thing for certain: we wouldn't give up. We would face this new challenge head on, and we would overcome it together. Chapter 11: Fraying Bonds. David stood apart from us, his figure a lone silhouette against the crackling fire that had once warmed us all. The faces around me were a mix of anger, disbelief, and sorrow. Raj, with his usual calm demeanor, now a storm of agitation, was the first to break the silence. "We trusted you," he said, his voice a mix of accusation and pain. "How could you?" David's eyes, which had once held a spark of camaraderie, now flickered with something unreadable. "I had no choice," he replied, his words falling flat in the tense air. "It's always a choice," I countered firmly, stepping closer. "You put us all in danger, David. For what?" He didn't answer, just shifted his gaze to the ground, a silent admission of guilt. The group's unity, once as solid as the earth beneath our feet, was now a frayed rope, each strand threatening to snap under the weight of betrayal. "We should just turn him over to them," Alex growled, his large hands balling into fists at his sides. "No," Emily interjected, her voice cutting through the tension. "We're not executioners." Her words hung between us, a reminder of the humanity we struggled to preserve in a world that had all but forgotten it. Josh shifted uncomfortably, his youthful face contorted in conflict. "So what do we do with him?" The question was a heavy one, laden with the gravity of its implications. "We let him go," I said finally, meeting each of their gazes. "Under the cover of night, he leaves. We can't sink to their level." The group muttered amongst themselves, the murmur of voices a discordant symphony of doubt and assent. David said nothing, accepting his fate with a nod that seemed to carry the weight of the world. As we prepared to see him off, Michael approached me, his eyes searching mine for reassurance. "Are we doing the right thing, Karen?" I sighed, feeling the mantle of leadership like a yoke around my neck. "I don't know, Michael. But we can't let fear and anger turn us into something we're not." The group gathered, a somber assembly, as David collected his few belongings. The firelight danced on their faces, casting shadows that seemed to reflect the turmoil within. "You'll never make it out there alone," Raj said, a note of regret in his voice despite everything. David looked up, his eyes meeting Raj's. "I guess I'll have to take my chances." With that, he turned and walked into the embrace of the night, his form swallowed by the darkness, until he was nothing more than a whisper on the wind. We watched in silence, each of us wrestling with the moral quandary of our decision. The bond that held us together had been tested, but as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, it held. We moved on, the desert before us a blank canvas on which we would paint our destiny. The betrayal was a scar upon our hearts, but it would not define us. We were survivors, seekers of the elusive freedom that called to us with the promise of a new beginning, and we would not be deterred. Chapter 12, A Devil's Deal. "Karen," he called out, his voice as gruff as the sandpaper wind that whipped around us. "Seems you've run out of places to hide." Raj, his fingers twitching towards the gadget he'd been tinkering with, gave me a sidelong glance. Emily stood rigid, her medical bag clutched like a shield. Jaws's eyes darted around, searching for an escape that didn't exist. And Michael, his presence a silent support, watched the general with a steely gaze. I stepped forward, my voice a calm contrast to the storm of anxiety brewing within the group. "What do you want, General?" Steelman's eyes, as cold and hard as the steel blue of his gaze, fixed on me. "I want to make a deal, Karen. No more running. You give me what I need and I'll let you pass." The words hung between us, an offer laced with danger. I could feel the eyes of my companions boring into me, their fears and doubts a palpable force. "And if we refuse?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The general's smile was humorless. "Then we do this the hard way. I have the might of the military behind me, Karen. You know how this ends." I turned to the group, their faces a mosaic of concern and resolve. "Give us a moment," I said to Steelman, who nodded curtly before stepping back to confer with his armed escorts. In a tight circle we weighed our fate. "We can't trust him," Raj whispered, the shadows beneath his eyes betraying his fatigue. Emily nodded in agreement, her voice barely above the hiss of the wind. "He'll turn on us the first chance he gets." Joss's hand tightened on his weapon. "Let's fight. Better than being pawns in his game." But Michael's hand on my shoulder stilled the brewing storm. "Karen, we might not get another chance. If there's a way through, we have to take it." Their eyes were on me, the unspoken leader, the one who had to make the call. I turned back to Steelman, my decision made. "We'll do it," I said, my voice steady, "but on our terms." The general raised an eyebrow, a silent challenge. "I'm listening." "The exchange happens at dawn. We give you what you want, and you give us safe passage. No tricks, no traps." Steelman considered this, the gears turning behind his calculating stare. "Agreed. But don't try anything, Karen. I'll be watching." As he and his men retreated, the weight of our decision settled on the group like the evening chill. Doubts and fears whispered among us, questioning the cost of our freedom. "Did we just sign a deal with the devil?" Raj asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. I looked at each of them, their faces etched with the trials of our journey. "Maybe," I admitted, "but we'll face that devil together." The night settled around us, a shroud of uncertainty. But beneath the stars, our determination hardened. The path to freedom was never promised to be without its devils, and we were ready to face them head-on. Chapter 13, In the Lion's Den. Raj adjusted his tool belt, laden with devices of his own creation, as he cast a wary glance at the imposing gates. "Ready for this?" he asked, his voice steady despite the gravity of our task. I nodded, feeling the weight of our task. "Let's get this done." Michael clasped my hand for a brief moment, his touch a silent message of solidarity. Our bond, forged in the fires of adversity, was our lodestar in the encroaching gloom. We slipped through the shadows, our movements a practiced choreography. Emily kept close to me, her medical bag ready for the inevitable. Jaw's youthful exuberance had been tempered by the trials we faced, his posture alert and ready for conflict. As we infiltrated the base, the air crackled with tension. Soldiers marched in rigid formation, unaware of the deception we wove around them. The coup had thrown the stronghold into disarray, the perfect cover for our gambit. "Karen," Michael whispered, his eyes locked on a distant figure moving with authority among the troops. "There's Steelman." I followed his gaze, spotting the general as he barked orders. This was our moment, the culmination of all our efforts. We made our way to the hangar, a cavernous structure that housed the machines of war. Raj led the way, deftly disabling the security measures with a few twists of his tools. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the key to our escape. An armored transport vehicle, its keys left in the ignition by some stroke of fortune. Emily breathed a sigh of relief, while Joss let out a low whistle. Nice ride. But our victory was short-lived. The sound of gunshots echoed and the base erupted into chaos. The coup was in full swing, a maelstrom of violence that threatened to engulf us. Into the vehicle now! I shouted as we scrambled aboard the transport. Raj fired up the engine, the roar drowning out the pandemonium outside. As we tore through the base, a stray bullet whizzed past the window, a herald of the dangers that nipped at our heels. Michael returned fire, his shots precise, buying us precious seconds. The gates loomed ahead, a final barrier to freedom. Raj slammed the pedal to the floor, and the transport smashed through the gates with a screech of twisted metal. We emerged on the other side, battered but intact, the stronghold a fading specter in the rearview mirror. The desert stretched before us, a blank canvas upon which we would paint our destiny. As the adrenaline of our escape ebbed, Michael reached for my hand again, his grip firm. "We did it," he said, a note of awe in his voice. I squeezed his hand in return, our shared look one of mutual understanding. Our love was a quiet flame that burned all the brighter amidst the chaos. The stronghold, the coup, and the treachery we had faced were behind us now. Ahead lay the path to the Flagstaff Mountains, to the freedom we had chased like a mirage in the desert. We drove on, our hearts heavy with the cost of our journey, yet light with the promise of the new life that awaited us beyond the horizon. Chapter 14, Embers of Hope. Raj, his face smeared with the grime of our travels, fiddled with the last of our water purifiers, his hands skilled but shaking from exhaustion. "We're running low on filters," he announced, his voice echoing the grim reality of our situation. Emily, her once pristine nurse's uniform, now a tapestry of patches and repairs, glanced at our diminished supplies with a furrowed brow. "We need to ration what we've got left," she stated, the gravity of her words hanging heavy in the air. Michael, his protective gaze scanning the horizon for threats, nodded in agreement. "We've come too far to be taken down by dehydration." Joss, the youngest among us, clutched his makeshift weapon tightly, as if willing his commitment to match that of his elder companions. "Maybe there's an oasis out there, hidden beneath the dunes," he offered, a hopeful glimmer in his eyes. I placed a hand on his shoulder, appreciating his optimism while preparing him for the harsh truth. "We've got to prepare for the worst, Joss. Hope won't fill our canteens." The conversation was cut short by a distant rumble, the telltale sign of a storm brewing on the horizon. Sandstorms were common in these parts, but this one felt different, more foreboding, more menacing. Alex, his broad frame a corroboration to the physical toll of our escape, peered into the distance. "Looks like we've got company," he said, a note of concern in his voice. It wasn't just sand being kicked up by the winds. It was a convoy of military vehicles, their intentions undoubtedly hostile. The sanctuary's promise of safety was slipping through our fingers like the fine desert sand. "We can't outrun them, not in this terrain," I said, the weight of command pressing down on me. "We need a distraction." Without hesitation, Raj stepped forward, a determined spark in his hazel eyes. "I've got this. I can rig the purifier to overheat, cause a bit of a spectacle." "Raj, no," I protested, knowing the cost of his plan. "We need you." He shook his head, a sad smile on his lips. "You need freedom more." As he set off, the group protested, but Raj's decision was made. With a heart-wrenching explosion, the purifier burst into flames, drawing the attention of our pursuers and allowing us a precious window to disappear into the tumultuous dance of the sandstorm. The cost of freedom had never been so stark, so visceral. We trudged on, the absence of Raj's presence a gaping hole in our ranks. That night, as we gathered around a flickering fire, the embers a cruel imitation of the explosion that had bought our safety, the silence was deafening. Emily broke the stillness. "He gave us a chance. We owe it to him to keep going." Michael took my hand, his grip firm, a silent vow to honor Raj's sacrifice. "We'll make it, for him." Jos, tears glistening on his cheeks, nodded. He was the bravest of us all. The mantle of leadership weighed heavily upon my shoulders. The realization that each decision could mean life or death for those I had come to see as my family. I looked at the faces around me, etched with grief and determination, and knew that we would press on, carrying the embers of hope Raj had ignited in our hearts. The sanctuary was out there, and with each step, we honored the memory of our fallen friend. We were survivors, fighters, and though the desert sought to claim us, we would not yield. The mirage of freedom was within reach, and we would grasp it, no matter the cost. Chapter 15, The Threshold of Liberty. "Look at that," Emily said, her voice a mix of awe and exhaustion as she pointed toward the mountain's silhouette. Almost there. Michael, walking beside me, squeezed my hand. His presence had been a constant, a source of strength that had quietly fueled my determination. "We've come so far," he said, "just a little further." I nodded, my muscles aching and my lips parched, but the sight of our destination renewed my spirit. We had been running on fumes, our physical and emotional reserves nearly depleted. Yet the dream of freedom, the sanctuary that awaited us, spurred us on. Alex trudged ahead, his large frame silhouetted against the lightening sky. "I never thought I'd be happy to see a bunch of rocks," he joked, though the weariness in his voice was evident. Joss, his youthful optimism a flickering flame in the dimming night, chimed in. "Those aren't just rocks, Alex. That's our new home." As we made our way through the wilderness, the brush and brambles clawed at our clothes, a final test of endurance. Each step forward was a triumph over the countless obstacles we had faced. "We need to keep a good pace," I reminded the group. "We're not safe until we're through those mountains." Their nods were silent, their faces set with the resolve that had carried us this far. The terrain grew more challenging, the incline steeper, but with each labored breath, the promise of sanctuary seemed closer. We helped each other over the rough patches, our camaraderie unspoken but deeply felt. As the sun climbed higher, its rays warming the chill from our bones, Michael leaned in close. "Karen, when this is all over, what's the first thing you want to do in our new life?" I smiled, the thought of a future without fear a balm to my weary soul. "Sleep, for an entire day," I replied, half joking, "and then wake up to a world where we're free to love without looking over our shoulders." Michael's grin was a pharos in the landscape of uncertainty. "That sounds perfect." The group's laughter mingled with the sounds of the wilderness, a chorus of hope on the cusp of realization. As we reached the edge of the promised sanctuary, the mountains rose before us, a formidable barrier that had kept the dream alive in our hearts. We paused, taking in the sight, the threshold of liberty a stone's throw away. "We did it," Emily breathed, her eyes brimming with tears. "We did it together," I corrected, my voice steady despite the overwhelming emotion that threatened to spill over. We stood together on the precipice of a new beginning, the past a distant memory, the future a canvas yet to be painted. Our journey had been fraught with peril, but as we crossed the threshold, we knew that the chase was over. We had caught the mirage of freedom, and it was more real than we had ever dared to imagine. Chapter 16, New Dawn Over the Peaks. "We did it," I murmured, my voice carrying the weight of countless miles and trials. Michael, standing beside me, his face weathered yet handsome from our arduous journey, nodded. "We made it, Karen. We're home." The word home echoed in my mind, a concept that felt both foreign and achingly desired. As we made our way through the gates, the people of the free city gathered, their cheers a chorus of triumph against the backdrop of the mountains. Alex, his towering silhouette drawing looks of admiration, let out a deep, relieved laugh. "Would you listen to that? They're cheering for us." Emily, her eyes scanning the crowd, smiled faintly. "Heroes, huh?" Never thought I'd see the day. Even Joss, who had grown quiet in recent times, seemed to perk up at the sight of our reception. "Look at all these people. We're not alone anymore." The city's leaders, a heterogeneous group of hardened survivors and idealistic rebels, stepped forward to greet us. Handshakes and pats on the back were exchanged, the warmth of their welcome a sharp distinction to the cold, unforgiving world beyond the mountains. As the celebration unfolded, I found myself at odds, the joy of our arrival tinged with the memory of those we had lost. Raj's absence was a void no amount of cheering could fill. Michael, sensing my inner turmoil, leaned in close. "Hey, it's all right to feel this way. We've paid a high price for this moment. I nodded, the acknowledgement of our shared loss a small comfort. I just wish he could have seen this. The city, though a sanctuary, was not without its challenges. Disputes over resources and decisions for the community's future sparked heated debates among the leaders. "We'll need to pull our weight here," Emily said, her gaze thoughtful as she observed the discussions. "This place, it's a fresh start, but it's not perfect." Joss chimed in, his youthful voice carrying a newfound maturity. "Yeah, but it's ours to make right. We can help shape it, make sure it stays free." The day gave way to evening, and as the stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky, the city gathered around a large bonfire. Stories were shared, tales of bravery and loss, each word weaving the fabric of our new community tighter. Michael wrapped an arm around my shoulders, his presence a steady force. "We're going to make a life here, Karen. A good one." I leaned into him, the comfort of his embrace a balm to the weariness that clung to my bones. "Together," I affirmed. As the fire's embers glowed against the darkening sky, I realized that our journey had not ended, it had merely transformed. Here in the free city, under the new dawn over the peaks, we would build, we would heal, and we would continue to fight for the freedom that had guided us every step of the way. The mirage of freedom had become our reality, and with it came the promise of a future unbound by oppression. The end. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed Chasing the Mirage of Freedom. Please smash that like button, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily storytelling adventures.